Now, I want to focus on what's become a vicious and complex conflict. We've reported from Sudan often on this programme, but the scale of the destruction, the human suffering and the humanitarian cost is intensifying as the two sides, the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces, battle for control of the country. Millions of civilians are paying the price. And their need for aid is growing, just as the US and UK cut back on their budgets to fortify themselves at home. Now, some of the images that you'll see in the next half an hour will be distressing, but as Western governments look inwards, it's important that we focus on the places that news cameras don't often reach. Here's our first report from our Africa correspondent, Yousra Elbagir.
A scream of sheer agony from a child tortured by the blast that set her on fire. She cries for her mother, who can't afford to change her soiled bandages. Khadija was burnt as she pulled her daughter out to safety. They survived the shell that hit their home, but have to contend with what it left behind.
I'd rather die than hear her cries. We are so exhausted. I am praying she recovers and one day plays and lives like any other child.
Everywhere we turn, a child is connected to a lifeline. Oxygen, IV drips, consoling tap of a mother, of little help in the disaster of this war.
Children of all ages are bearing the brunt of this war, whether it's sickness, disease, hunger, but also direct combat injuries. And even as the military moves forward and reclaims more territory, it's an entire generation that will have to contend with the horrifying impacts of this conflict.
The number of patients increasing.
The number of patients is increasing.
Increasing, yes.
The reclaiming of territory held by the RSF has flooded this hospital with children cut off from vital care for months.
The total number of patients per day, the casualty, will arrive 150.
Wow. All of them children?
All of them children.
For the mothers who come here, the war is changing their children at every level.
He just won't gain any weight. We check his weight in grams. His older brothers have become violent, obsessed with fighting and naming types of guns.
Girls too are engaging with the rampant militarization, learning drills for a sense of self-defense. The stories of mass rape and sexual slavery at the hands of the RSF take on new meaning as girls break free and share the horror they've faced. Hanadi was only 15 when an RSF fighter forced her into marriage and kept her as a sex slave.
He shot my mother and detained my dad and brother. He'd force me to sleep with him. He'd tie me down to the bed and say I had no choice. Other times, he'd beat me.
When she fell pregnant, she had to fight to keep her baby.
When he found out I was pregnant, he took me to get an abortion. After I refused, he tried to make me miscarry.
Millions of women and children are at the mercy of troops on either side, with the army and RSF both accused of war crimes and recruiting child soldiers. As the battles for control continue, the most vulnerable civilians are constant collateral. More shelling has destroyed another family. 8 people killed in a single strike. 4 of them were children, and the youngest was only 3 years old. 3 girls and a boy, says the mortician. I ask him how he feels about these small bodies.
We're grown-ups. We found all we need in the world. But why were they involved? They were innocent.
Their loved ones have come home to find them gone. 8 of them across 3 generations, killed by an RSF shell. She lists the casualties: her mother, her sister, her niece, then is overtaken by grief. And outside, a surviving baby is finally asleep after crying for her missing mother.
This baby is less than a year old, Jihan. Her siblings, mother and grandmother were killed in that strike, and she survived, but the whole neighborhood is rallied around her, knowing full well that this child will spend the rest of their life reckoning with this war.
Here, the youngest are hit the hardest, grappling with inconceivable loss, as those they lean on to survive this war become its latest victims. Yousra Elbagir, Sky News, Omdurman.